Imagine loving someone who seems to pull away the moment you get too close. Someone whose affection feels like a dance between presence and absence, yet leaves you craving more. Now imagine that same person, driven not by love, but by desire, seeking connection only when it serves their own gratification. What is the difference between a heart genuinely invested and one merely chasing lust? Understanding this distinction is like peering behind the carefully constructed walls of an avoidant, uncovering the hidden patterns that reveal whether they truly love you or are simply captivated by the thrill of the moment. Today, we dive into the subtle, often invisible behaviors that separate authentic attachment from fleeting desire and explore the psychology behind what avoidant individuals do when they're in love versus when it's just lust. When it comes to understanding what an avoidant person does when they're in love versus when it's just lust, the difference often begins with emotional depth. Avoidant individuals are typically characterized by their fear of vulnerability and closeness. But that doesn't mean they are incapable of deep emotional experiences. When they are in love, their actions, though sometimes subtle or even inconsistent, carry emotional significance and reflect a desire to connect meaningfully with their partner. Love for an avoidant is not always loud or demonstrative. It often manifests in small, deliberate gestures that reveal thoughtfulness, consideration, and emotional engagement. They might not openly declare their feelings in grand statements, but the way they remember the little details about you, check in on your emotional well-being, or make quiet sacrifices reveals the depth of their attachment. There is a certain intentionality behind their behaviors, even if it is cloaked in a veneer of independence or emotional restraint. These actions indicate a willingness to navigate discomfort and lean into emotional intimacy despite their instinctive urge to protect themselves. In contrast, when an avoidant person is motivated by lust rather than love, their emotional engagement is shallow and transient. Lust-driven interactions tend to be focused on immediate gratification, physical connection, or surface-level attention. In these scenarios, emotional depth is largely absent, and any gestures or words of affection are transactional. They serve the purpose of maintaining interest or obtaining a response, rather than nurturing a meaningful bond. The avoidance behavior is often predictable and repetitive: flirtation, physical pursuit, and charm without substance. There is no underlying desire to understand your inner world or meet emotional needs beyond the momentary satisfaction of desire. While someone in love might go out of their way to understand your struggles, celebrate your achievements, or provide comfort, someone motivated by lust rarely invests in these emotional layers. Another key difference lies in how they respond to your vulnerabilities. An avoidant in love will engage with your emotional revelations carefully, sometimes awkwardly, but with an effort to create connection. They might retreat temporarily to process their own feelings or avoid overwhelming intensity, but their withdrawal is followed by re-engagement or reassurance. When lust is the driver, the avoidant rarely responds with genuine empathy or interest in your internal state. Emotional disclosures may be met with detachment, diversion, or even exploitation if it serves their immediate purpose. They are not seeking to co-create a safe space for shared vulnerability. They are seeking a mirror for their own desires. Communication is another area where emotional depth becomes evident. When in love, avoidants tend to exhibit a level of attentiveness that goes beyond mere logistics. Even if brief, their messages, gestures, or interactions carry thought and reflection. They notice subtle shifts in mood or needs and respond in ways that demonstrate care, even if indirectly. In lust-driven scenarios, communication is perfunctory or sporadic, often vanishing when desire wanes or external distractions appear. The difference is not always dramatic in quantity, as avoidance can be naturally distant, but the quality of engagement, its intentionality, nuance, and emotional resonance marks the divide between love and lust. Finally, one of the most telling signs of emotional depth is the way they prioritize your well-being alongside their own. Love prompts them to balance their need for autonomy with consideration for you, even if imperfectly. Lust rarely inspires this balancing act. Self-interest dominates. An avoidant in love might struggle with closeness, but the effort, however restrained, is directed towards sustaining the connection. Lust, on the other hand, bypasses connection entirely, focusing instead on fleeting, surface-level satisfaction that leaves no lasting impact. In this way, emotional depth is the subtle, often quiet distinction that separates true attachment from transient desire. The pattern is clear. Love manifests in intentional, emotionally resonant actions, while lust stays at the surface, driven by immediate gratification and self-interest. For someone navigating a relationship with an avoidant, recognizing this distinction can be the key to understanding the motives behind their behavior and the nature of their attachment. When exploring the behavior of an avoidant person, consistency versus fluctuation becomes one of the clearest indicators of whether their feelings stem from genuine love or mere lust. Avoidant individuals are often misunderstood because their natural tendencies lean toward withdrawal, independence, and emotional self-protection. This means that even in a loving relationship, their behavior can appear inconsistent to an outside observer. However, beneath this apparent inconsistency lies a subtle thread of effort and intention that distinguishes love from fleeting desire. When an avoidant is in love, their communication, presence, and engagement may not always be constant, but there is a pattern of care that threads through their interactions. They may take time to process emotions, retreat to regain equilibrium, or appear distant temporarily, yet they return, demonstrating a commitment to maintaining the connection. This return is not forced or transactional. It stems from a genuine investment in the relationship. Even small gestures, such as checking in after a long day, remembering something important to you, or making an effort to adjust their habits, subtly reflect the consistency that is unique to love. Over time, these patterns reveal a reliability that is not always loud but meaningful, showing that they are willing to navigate their fears to preserve the bond. In contrast, when an avoidant is motivated primarily by lust, their behavior is marked by pronounced fluctuation, often without the stabilizing thread of intention. Communication may spike during moments of physical desire or excitement, only to vanish when the initial attraction diminishes. These fluctuations are not driven by self-reflection or the need to regulate emotional space, but by the immediate ebb and flow of desire. There is no underlying aim to nurture the relationship, create security, or build trust. Instead, their presence and engagement are contingent on what they want in the moment. Texts, calls, or visits are often inconsistent and unpredictable, leaving the other person uncertain and emotionally unbalanced. The fluctuation in behavior is a reflection of the absence of commitment and genuine emotional attachment. Unlike love, where temporary withdrawal is followed by reassurance or renewed connection, lust-driven interaction is episodic and transactional, leaving no long-term thread of engagement. Consistency in love is also reflected in how avoidants handle disagreements, challenges, or emotional intensity. When they care deeply, even if uncomfortable with confrontation, they return to discussions, attempt resolution, and work through misunderstandings. They may need space, but the intention to sustain the connection is present. This does not mean their efforts are perfect or free from avoidance tendencies, but there is an underlying drive to maintain continuity and cohesion. Conversely, when their engagement is rooted in lust, conflict often results in permanent withdrawal, avoidance without reconciliation, or a lack of effort to repair any emotional disruption. The absence of continuity in interaction signals that the relationship's stability is not a priority. It exists only insofar as it serves immediate desire. Another layer of this distinction lies in the way they manage expectations and dependability. In love, avoidants make subtle but meaningful attempts to balance their need for independence with the other person's needs. They may struggle with consistency outwardly, but their actions indicate a desire to be reliable in ways that matter, even if understated. In lust-driven connections, there is no balancing act. They are guided primarily by what serves their momentary interest, which means any consistency is coincidental rather than intentional. Patterns of attention, engagement, and care emerge only when convenient or pleasurable for them. Ultimately, the distinction between consistency and fluctuation is crucial in understanding an avoidant person's motivation. In love, there is an underlying commitment that manifests in small, deliberate ways, creating a subtle but dependable rhythm of care. In lust, behavior is erratic, self-serving, and focused entirely on immediate gratification, leaving no durable thread of emotional engagement. Recognizing these patterns allows one to discern between fleeting desire and authentic emotional investment, revealing the true nature of the connection and the depth of the avoidant's feelings. When examining the behavior of an avoidant individual, their approach to intimacy and commitment reveals a significant difference between genuine love and fleeting lust. Avoidants are often characterized by a profound fear of closeness, which can manifest as emotional distance, hesitation, or withdrawal. This fear is rooted in the instinct to protect themselves from vulnerability, rejection, or perceived loss of autonomy. However, when an avoidant is genuinely in love, this fear of intimacy is tempered by a conscious or subconscious desire to maintain the relationship and connect on a deeper level. Love motivates them to cautiously navigate their discomfort, allowing moments of closeness, sharing of emotions, and investment in the partnership, even if it feels unnatural or challenging. They may struggle with direct emotional expression, yet the effort they make to bridge the gap between their internal world and the partner's emotional needs demonstrates a willingness to confront their fears. This is not an easy process for them, and it may involve gradual exposure to vulnerability, thoughtful listening, and subtle gestures of care that signal their attachment. Their fear of intimacy does not disappear, but it is actively managed because the bond is valued. In contrast, when avoidants are driven primarily by lust, the fear of commitment dominates their behavior, and intimacy is almost entirely avoided. Lust is concerned with immediate gratification and physical connection rather than the long-term security or emotional depth of a relationship. In these scenarios, avoidants engage superficially, seeking the pleasures of closeness without the responsibilities, expectations, or potential emotional entanglements that true intimacy entails. They may flirt, initiate physical encounters, or display charm, but these actions are designed to satisfy desire rather than nurture emotional connection. Any exposure to vulnerability or deep emotional sharing is often deflected, dismissed, or met with detachment, as committing emotionally represents a risk they are unwilling to take. Whereas love prompts cautious yet deliberate engagement with emotional intimacy, lust encourages avoidance of it altogether, creating relationships that are transactional, fleeting, and emotionally hollow. The difference also becomes evident in how avoidants respond to the needs and vulnerabilities of their partner. When in love, they may experience discomfort in emotionally charged situations, but they are willing to tolerate it to maintain connection and support their partner. They listen, offer reassurance, or make compromises, even if doing so challenges their instinct for distance. Their fear of intimacy coexists with a motivation to engage meaningfully, creating a push-and-pull dynamic where withdrawal and closeness alternate but ultimately point toward connection. With lust, however, the avoidance reaction to emotional expression is markedly different. vulnerability may be met with avoidance, irritation, or a shift of focus to themselves, demonstrating that their primary concern is protecting their independence rather than participating in mutual emotional growth. Emotional needs that do not directly serve their immediate desire are often ignored or minimized, highlighting the lack of long-term investment. Another key distinction lies in the future orientation of their engagement. Love encourages them to consider consequences, anticipate emotional needs, and work toward a sustainable partnership. Even if their communication style is inconsistent, their actions reveal an awareness of relational continuity and the importance of preserving trust and closeness. Lust, on the other hand, lacks foresight. The focus is on present satisfaction, and any planning or effort is limited to ensuring continued access to what gratifies them now. There is little consideration of relational impact or shared emotional growth, as commitment is consciously avoided to protect themselves from vulnerability. The way avoidants handle internal conflict also reflects this distinction. Love motivates them to reflect on their fears, regulate withdrawal, and make conscious choices to stay connected, whereas lust encourages avoidance, deflection, and prioritizing self-interest above relational harmony. This interplay between fear of intimacy and fear of commitment is central to understanding their behavior. In love, these fears are managed and negotiated. In lust, they dominate and define the interaction. Ultimately, the avoidance fear of intimacy versus fear of commitment acts as a lens through which their true intentions are revealed. Love inspires careful navigation of vulnerability and emotional engagement, even when uncomfortable, whereas lust prioritizes avoidance, immediate gratification, and self-preservation, leaving little room for meaningful connection or long-term relational growth. When observing the behavior of an avoidant person, their use of protective mechanisms versus opportunistic behavior provides a clear distinction between love and lust. Avoidant individuals are innately cautious when it comes to emotional exposure, and this caution often manifests as withdrawal, subtle distancing, or guardedness. When an avoidant is in love, these protective behaviors are employed thoughtfully, not to shut the partner out permanently, but as a way to process emotions, regulate anxiety, and maintain a sense of control while still investing in the relationship. They might need moments of solitude to think through their feelings, to reconcile their fear of vulnerability with their desire for connection, or to gather emotional energy to show care in a way that feels safe. This temporary withdrawal is not a rejection. Rather, it is a self-protective pause designed to ensure that when they do engage, they can do so meaningfully and without being overwhelmed. The avoidance return from these moments of distance often comes with renewed effort, subtle acts of consideration, or increased attentiveness, signaling that their care and attachment are genuine. In this way, their protective mechanisms are not barriers to intimacy, but tools to navigate it carefully, balancing their need for independence with their desire to nurture the relationship. In contrast, when avoidants are acting out of lust rather than love, their behavior tends to be opportunistic rather than protective. The same distancing or withdrawal, which in love is temporary and purposeful, becomes permanent or self-serving. Actions are guided primarily by what benefits them in the moment, such as physical satisfaction, attention, or ego reinforcement. There is no intention to maintain continuity, repair connection, or respond to the partner's emotional needs. If they disappear after a sexual encounter or when attention wanes, it is not a calculated pause to process feelings, but a reflection of a lack of investment. Engagement is situational and reactive rather than considered and intentional. Opportunistic behavior prioritizes immediate gain over long-term relational health, meaning that any acts of affection or attentiveness are performative or transactional rather than grounded in genuine care. Unlike love, which motivates careful navigation of discomfort to preserve connection. Lust motivates actions that are fleeting, self-centered, and uncommitted. The distinction between protective mechanisms and opportunistic behavior is also evident in how avoidants manage emotional tension or challenges within the relationship. When in love, avoidants may withdraw temporarily during conflict or emotional intensity, but this withdrawal is followed by attempts to reconcile, communicate, or re-establish connection. Their actions reflect a desire to manage their own discomfort without severing the bond or undermining the partner's trust. They may communicate in indirect ways, leave thoughtful messages, or make subtle efforts to show they care while they process their feelings privately. Even though their methods can appear distant or inconsistent, the underlying intent is relational preservation. In contrast, when motivated by lust, conflict or emotional complexity is often avoided entirely, ignored, or met with abrupt disengagement. There is no effort to navigate tension thoughtfully or repair relational cracks because the connection is not valued beyond immediate satisfaction. Emotional management is self-serving, designed to protect their autonomy and pleasure without consideration for the partner's needs. Another indication lies in the way avoidants demonstrate attentiveness. Protective behavior in love involves small, meaningful gestures that reflect thoughtfulness and care, even if subtly delivered. Opportunistic behavior, on the other hand, tends to be performative and timed around what benefits them or draws the partner closer temporarily. This difference highlights the underlying motivation. Love drives deliberate, emotionally resonant actions, whereas lust drives sporadic, self-serving engagement. Ultimately, the way avoidants employ protective mechanisms versus opportunistic behavior reveals their true orientation. In love, their guardedness is strategic and relationally oriented, designed to allow intimacy while managing internal fears. In lust, behavior is opportunistic, aimed at satisfying immediate desires without emotional investment or long-term commitment, leaving little room for genuine connection or sustained care. The distinction between the two is subtle but profound, offering insight into the avoidance motivations and the nature of their attachment. When examining the behavior of avoidant individuals, the distinction between quality of attention versus quantity of attention provides a critical insight into whether their actions are driven by love or by lust. Avoidant people are naturally self-reliant and protective of their emotional space, which means that their engagement with others is often measured, intentional, and selective. When an avoidant is genuinely in love, their attention, though it may appear limited or sporadic, is remarkably meaningful. They may not inundate their partner with constant messages or declarations of affection, but the moments when they do reach out or engage carry depth, thoughtfulness, and purpose. Small gestures, such as remembering something you mentioned in passing, sending a message to check on your well-being, or offering subtle support during a challenging moment, are indications that they are attuned to your emotional landscape. Their attention is focused, deliberate, and concentrated on what matters most, reflecting a desire to connect on a meaningful level rather than to fulfill an immediate desire for recognition or gratification. In this sense, quality matters far more than quantity. Each interaction, each gesture is weighted with intention, revealing the underlying emotional investment that might not be immediately visible on the surface. By contrast, when an avoidant is motivated by lust rather than love, attention tends to be superficial, episodic, and self-serving. Engagement is often driven by the pursuit of physical gratification, validation, or momentary excitement, rather than by a genuine desire to understand, support, or nurture their partner. Texts, calls, or meetings may occur frequently at times of desire, but these bursts of attention are fleeting and largely transactional. There is minimal investment in understanding the other person's thoughts, feelings, or inner world beyond how it serves their own needs. While an avoidant in love will notice and respond to subtle cues, an avoidant motivated by lust focuses on what is visible, tangible, and immediately gratifying. They may complement appearance, seek validation, or prioritize pleasurable interactions, but these actions lack emotional resonance and do not reflect a commitment to relational growth or depth. Their attention is measured not by its meaningfulness, but by its utility, highlighting the fundamental difference between love and lust. The distinction also becomes clear in how avoidants respond to moments requiring empathy or understanding. In love, they will make an effort, even if uncomfortable, to be present, listen, and offer support. They may need to withdraw briefly to regulate their own emotions, but the intention to provide meaningful attention remains. In lust, these moments are largely ignored or dismissed. Emotional disclosures, personal struggles, or significant experiences may be met with indifference, deflection, or superficial acknowledgement, as genuine engagement would require vulnerability and investment they are unwilling to offer. The attention they do provide in such contexts is often minimal and serves primarily to maintain access to physical or ego-driven satisfaction rather than to deepen emotional connection. Another important distinction lies in the consistency of focus. Avoidants in love demonstrate a pattern of attention that, while not always frequent, is persistent and directed toward what truly matters. This could manifest as remembering important dates, noticing subtle changes in mood, or responding thoughtfully when their partner reaches out. Avoidants driven by lust, on the other hand, may offer attention inconsistently and unpredictably, appearing intensely engaged at times only to disappear without explanation. Their focus is fleeting and contingent, dictated by desire rather than intention or commitment. Ultimately, the difference between quality and quantity of attention reveals the avoidant's true priorities. When in love, they channel their energy and presence deliberately, ensuring that even small gestures carry significance and foster connection. When motivated by lust, attention is scattered, self-serving, and fleeting, focused solely on immediate gratification without regard for emotional depth, stability, or long-term relational growth. This distinction underscores the subtle but profound ways in which avoidants demonstrate the nature of their attachment. When examining the behavior of avoidant individuals, their orientation toward long-term vision versus short-term satisfaction provides a profound lens through which to understand whether their motivations stem from genuine love or merely lust. Avoidants are naturally cautious, valuing autonomy and self-preservation, which often makes them appear distant, unpredictable, or hesitant to fully invest in relationships. However, when an avoidant experiences true love, their actions, even if subtly expressed, reflect an underlying consideration for the future of the relationship. They may struggle with vulnerability or emotional closeness, yet they make deliberate efforts to create stability, nurture trust, and maintain continuity. These efforts are not always loud or grandiose. They often manifest in small but meaningful ways, such as consistently showing up during important moments, making compromises that honor the partner's needs, or adjusting their own habits to preserve the bond. Even their occasional withdrawals are calculated and temporary, designed to process internal discomfort without jeopardizing the connection. This future-oriented mindset demonstrates that their care extends beyond the present moment, reflecting an investment in the sustainability and growth of the relationship rather than simply satisfying immediate impulses. In contrast, when an avoidant is motivated primarily by lust, the focus shifts almost entirely to short-term satisfaction. Interactions are driven by physical attraction, desire for validation, or the pursuit of immediate pleasure, rather than by any concern for long-term relational stability. There is little to no effort to anticipate future challenges, plan for emotional growth, or consider the partner's long-term needs. The avoidance engagement is transactional, existing only in the moment and dissipating once their immediate goals are met. Where love prompts cautious yet deliberate steps toward relational endurance, lust promotes impulsive actions, fleeting attention, and disregard for lasting consequences. The relationship in these circumstances is treated as a temporary convenience rather than a shared journey, and any emotional or practical considerations are subordinate to self-interest and momentary desire. This distinction becomes particularly evident in decision-making and behavioral patterns. An avoidant in love will often weigh their choices against the potential impact on the relationship, even if subconsciously. They may resist acting purely on impulse, pause before withdrawing, or seek subtle ways to reassure the partner while maintaining their personal boundaries. Their planning is guided by an awareness of relational longevity and a desire to maintain connection over time. Conversely, an avoidant motivated by lust acts impulsively, prioritizing what benefits them in the immediate term. Decisions are influenced by current desires, external opportunities, or personal convenience, rather than by consideration for the partner or the trajectory of the relationship. Actions may seem appealing in the moment, but they lack foresight, consistency, or relational responsibility. Another way this difference manifests is in conflict resolution and handling emotional intensity. Love encourages avoidants to navigate tension carefully, even if uncomfortable, to preserve trust and connection. They may step back briefly to regulate emotions, but they return with the intention of repair and understanding, demonstrating a commitment to the relationship's future. In contrast, when lust dominates, conflict often triggers avoidance or permanent disengagement. There is little motivation to reconcile, compromise, or consider the partner's perspective, as the relationship's long-term viability is not a priority. Immediate self-interest overrides the desire to sustain connection, leaving interactions shallow, unstable, and short-lived. The distinction between long-term vision and short-term satisfaction is also reflected in everyday behavior. Avoidants in love invest effort into meaningful gestures, shared experiences, and mutual growth, signaling a desire for a lasting bond. Those motivated by lust focus on instant gratification, fleeting pleasures, or self-centered outcomes, often neglecting the relational context and leaving no enduring impact. Ultimately, the presence of a long-term vision indicates that an avoidant values the relationship as a continuing partnership, navigating their fears of vulnerability to sustain connection and nurture growth. When short-term satisfaction dominates, the avoidant prioritizes momentary desire over relational depth, leaving emotional investment minimal and the bond ephemeral. This distinction illuminates the profound difference between love and lust, revealing the avoidant's true priorities, intentions, and capacity for connection.